Hey guys, Andrew Dowling here and Mitch Kurtz. Thanks for joining us for another episode of the AltMed podcast. Make sure to hit like and subscribe because we've got heaps more content coming out and it's really fun and great and we love it all. Also very good.
Hey guys, Andrew Dowling here. Welcome back for another episode of the AltMed podcast. With me as always, my co-host Mitch Kurtz. Mitch, how you doing?
Good, thank you.
Very special guest with us today, hailing from the other side of the country. We are so thrilled to be joined by Fleta Solomon, the CEO of Little Green Pharma. I bet you have probably heard of them because they are one of the biggest cannabis companies in Australia. Fleta, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me. This is really exciting.
Yeah, no, well, we've got, we've heard so much about Little Green Pharma along the way. And yeah, we're just really excited to dive into a few of the topics. So maybe, before we go into LGP, perhaps just how did you fall into cannabis? Because when I did a little cursory review of the old LinkedIn profile, I see that you, like pretty much everyone else in this industry, has come from a totally variable background. You were doing something to do with mining and physio. Anyway, so I'll throw it to you.
Historically, everything I have done previously has been in the health space. I'm an exercise physiologist, so that's my background. So I did exercise and health science and sold one of Australia's largest workplace providers of corporate health programs and behaviour change programs. So that was, I guess, my first career path, and that was changing people's lives for the better. So that was working out on remote mine sites and oil rigs and really just improving their life to live a better life. And yeah, that was really remarkable. It was tough because it was a service-based industry, but I always knew from there that I just wanted to sort of change lives. And that theme has really progressed throughout my career. And then there was another business that I had, which didn't actually eventuate, but I do have to talk about it briefly because it really helped to get me into where I am today. And that was based on a water technology treatment business, these silver oxide balls, I guess, or it's about the size of marbles that release silver oxide into contaminated water to render it drinkable. So here we had a solution for the billions of people across the world that didn't have access to safe drinking water. And the purpose for saying this is that I've never had such an amazing feeling about jumping out of bed in the morning and going, I'm going to work today to change the lives of all of these people throughout the world, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa, that don't have access to safe drinking water. Like, this is a thing. And we had the World Health Organization on board, the UN Water on board, the founding father of Namibia. And it was the most surreal and amazing feeling. And when that one fell through, to no fault of our own, I kind of went into a state of mourning. And I was like, what am I ever going to be able to do that has such a social impact, but also a commercial opportunity? So I actually sort of threw in the books for a while and went back to uni and did an MBA. And it was during my time at the MBA that cannabis was legalized in Australia for medicinal use. And it was just serendipitous because I started to look into it. And then I was introduced to a really remarkable man just here in Western Australia who is really well connected, but also made me very aware of a patient or a young child suffering debilitating seizures every day. And the only thing that would reduce her seizures was accessing cannabis. And that was on the black market at that stage. Wow. And it was really then and there, sitting on a bench down at Yallingup in the southwest of WA, that I kind of sat next to him and, would look at him and looked up and sort of went, what if we could create cannabis, a legal cannabis medicine grown right here in WA and change somebody else's life?
Yeah.
And that's exactly when Little Green Pharma was born. And that was sort of on the 11th of January, 2017.
Wow. Down in that's very close to wine country, isn't it? Yallingup?
Yes, it is. It's right in that Margaret River region. So it's, yes, we're surrounded by vineyards. So it's just so beautiful down there. And, wow. The most divine location. So all of our guests that come and visit the facility, it's mandatory that they stay for a couple of nights to experience the Great Southwest because it is phenomenal.
That sounded a lot like an invite. I don't know if I got the same thing there. But
yes, come on over, please. We love visitors. Love having visitors. It's 3 hours from Perth, so it's a bit of a mission.
Well, we do know that I guess growing conditions are similar to that to some degree with wine growing conditions. So, some of the best wine comes out of that Margaret River region. So it stands to reason that there could be some decent crops coming out of that particular part of the world.
Well, it makes sense. Our head of cultivation is actually a viticulturalist and is one of the biggest winemakers as well. So, just loves and understands plants, and that's where we were very fortunate, because he was also had a hemp license to begin with, and that's kind of the connection that we had and how we got started into the medicinal cannabis space. But you're absolutely right, and as a viticulturalist, there are many down there. We believe we're onto a winner in terms of our site manager and cultivation manager.
Yeah, that is amazing. So take me back. So 2017, you've realized that, obviously you're in one of the best locations in Australia for growing. What happens next?
Yeah, so then I just had to put the commercial hat on, and I love starting up businesses. I've always worked for myself. So that's, I think, what probably my strength is, starting something from nothing. So from an idea. So it was about getting and engaging certain people who I thought could be mentors, as well as commercial people, groups that could potentially start some funding. So we were looking then almost bootstrapping, but a little bit of a sort of Series A and some investment funds. Never wanted to list, always wanted to be a private company. I've never been in that public space before, didn't have any desire to. It was always meant to be a private company, and I just wanted to be able to do our thing. I had no idea if we were to fast forward 6 years to where we are now, there is no way that I would have guessed that this is where we would be. I guess I didn't really think of where I'm going to be or how am I going to exit. All I was thinking at the time is, how do we create a little company called Little Green Pharma that's just here for the right reason to help some patients? And at first I was my mindset was, can we help another patient down in the Margaret River region? And then it went to WA and then to Australia, and then a year or two later it went to thousands of patients across the world. So it evolved very organically, not necessarily according to my original business plan. So I think I had to be very flexible in terms of listening to shareholders, because in the end it was pretty much shareholders that dictated where the company was going.
Yeah, wow. Did they ever have the idea of rebranding to Big Green Pharma, or that was never on the cards?
Yeah, look, it's funny.
So dumb.
It is.
Well, it's just because it grew so quickly. I remember in the early days, it was like, there were just a few companies that really shot.
Well, they had to go to medium green pharma first, and then big green pharma,
and then it'll be extra large. Yeah, I get it.
Oh, funny. Look, I do have a lot of people. Most people love it. There are some people that don't like it so much. And I remember one shareholder saying to me, why are you called little? It just means that you can never grow big. And then my response, I quite liked my response, which is, well, did you tell that to Microsoft?
Yeah, totally.
So I'm kind of like, I wanted to play on the word little, because I wanted to come across as we're really approachable, we're really friendly, we're really, we're pharma, but we're not the synthetically manufactured big pharma company. We're the Little Green Pharma. And most importantly, I wanted our patients to know that we are so approachable, that if you pick up the phone, we have a real person right here in WA that will answer your call. And that's what we still do today. And that is the most important thing for us, which nobody actually knows about Little Green Pharma. It's our customer care team, who we hand select so carefully, because they are so integral to our business, and yet nobody sort of knows, unless you're an LGP patient, nobody knows that we have this team. And it's almost like a call center, but it's for people that, our existing patients that ring to ask us questions, and we love that side of it. So again, the name Little Green Pharma was kind of chosen for that reason as well.
It's true. It's a disarming name. Anyway, I really like it. But so how quickly was it before you got the licenses and everything? Take me through that.
Yeah, so it actually, in hindsight, it went quite quickly, even though the waiting periods felt like a really long time back then. But I think we were fortunate because we started with a really small operation, and our business model was very different to a lot who are out there. We, rather than sort of build it and they will come type philosophy, we very much were running on a really tight ship and had a really small amount of capital just to see that we could actually produce a cannabis medicine. So we had a really small room. So our facility is an indoor facility, and we literally had a handful of plants, might have been 60 plants, I think, back in the day in one room. And then working with the Office of Drug Control, we were the third company to get a license. And then, and then obviously we needed the permits so that we could actually start producing. And yeah, by 2018 in August, so what's that? So a year and a half after the idea came about, we had our first cannabis medicines that patients were using.
Wow.
And I guess that kind of caught us off guard. We didn't think that we would be the first company, and we weren't trying to be. It just happened. And I think it evolved because we weren't trying to grow too big too quickly. We just wanted to run with a few plants. There were very few patients at that time. So we didn't even know, the business model in terms of how much we needed. So we just wanted to prove that we could grow the plant to TGO 93 standards and have all the testing and compliance in place, and then finally produce a medicine that patients could actually use. And it was really once that happened and we had our first feedback after our first 6 patients in that August of 2018. And that's when we knew, right, we've done it. We've got a lot to learn, but we have a proof of concept and we're ready to expand. And really that's what happened. And so we sort of grew organically that way. And until such time that we needed to expand our facility down south. But that comes with a lot of time and a lot of expense. And we did get to a point, we can grow about 3 ton of biomass in our WA facility here.
Wow.
However, we did get to a stage where we were outgrowing and needed to expand again, but we were very fortuitous and came across another facility that was already in operation over in Europe, in Denmark, where the future of our business wants to be, and we recognise that Europe is the future for us. And so instead of expanding our West Australian operations, we decided to acquire this facility from Canopy Growth and refine it to our way. We have a unique way, and it's always different to any other group. Everyone's got their different methods and business models, and so we decided that we would go down that route instead of expanding our Australian ops.
Totally stole my segue there. I was going to start talking about the European connection. Curiously, curiously, when you say, Europe being the future, do you mean that from the perspective of supplying Europe or bringing things in for supply from Europe to Australia? What's kind of the, without giving too much of the board strategy away, like what's the high level on that you could maybe share with us?
Yeah, sure. And that's sort of evolving all the time. But I think where I was going is that very early on, in fact, when the Federal Health Minister announced that Australia was opening up for export, that was the time that we really felt that we weren't going to make a huge return on investment in Australia, mainly because of economies of scale. And although that Australia is an exceptionally important market to us because this is the heart of our business, it always will be. And it is so important for proof of concept, but it's just a numbers game. When you look at the population of Australia versus what's happening in Europe, and here we are, we've got this head start because of the mutual recognition agreement, thanks to our very high standards of GMP, TGA manufacturing. So due to that unique opportunity, we just thought we're in a really great position to be able to potentially take on the EU market as well, because the Canadians were struggling a little bit to get there, just because they had to have GMP audit. And even then, the jury's still out as to how far they can export, or if they can only export into sort of one European country. And of course, the US can't export at all. So here we thought, look, Australian companies really have the opportunity. And so it was back in probably early 2019 that we took that stance that we need to be in Europe. That's where the future growth is, mainly because we have a lot of pressure and accountability from and for our shareholders. So as much as we love Australia and that this is really important to us, very integral, we see the future, versus the 26 million people in Australia versus the 380 million people in Europe. That's excluding Russia. You can kind of see where the lucrative markets are going to be as they start to emerge and open up. So that's where I was heading originally. But I do think that Europe is actually really important now for bringing in high quality GMP flower into the Australian market, especially given the changes coming on the 1st of July.
Yeah, I definitely see it as two-way, because I know, anecdotally, there's a lot of interest, it would seem, from European countries in having Australian flower. They know it's grown under certain conditions and to a certain high standard. And I think as the cultivation that's occurring in Australia improves year on year, I think we just get better and better at growing better quality products. So I know there's an appetite for it there. And equally, to your point, if you're at capacity with WA, then plenty of opportunity to import from Denmark and have it all done under GMP over there. So yeah, massively support that. You touched on it just now, but we've obviously followed as part of the very public nature of a company like LGP. We see announcements about investors. We know you've got some high profile investors, Gina Reinhart to name but one. As the CEO, what's it been like having a pretty broad mix of investors? What's that journey been like for LGP? Have you found that along the way you've always been able to find funds from investors as and when you've needed to go, or have there been times that have been harder than others?
Oh, there's definitely been times harder than others. And the hardest time that we had was probably 6 months ago when we did, I think, a 4 million placement. That was really tough. The market's really tough. Previously, before then, and we have done a lot of raising, I hardly had to sell anything. It was more just catching up with some investors and saying, this is what the plan is. And overnight we would raise, oversubscribe by 100 million. And, we were knocking back capital, which now I think, what do we do that for? And so times really have changed, and investors absolutely, without a doubt, across the world are now looking to profitability. Gone are the days of what I call sort of exploration, like gold exploration. It's really now in that production stage where investors do need to see a return on their investment. So it is all about the profitability pathway. So we are really fortunate in that we are very much, almost there. Like our sights are set on that now. So most of our capital, our CapEx is all done, and we're just sort of now enjoying that ride to get to break even. So I think because we've got a pretty clear pathway ahead, our key investors particularly, let's call them our top 10, they understand exactly what's going on all of the time. We catch up with them very regularly. They're so important to us, and they really help to dictate what we do in the company. And I couldn't do this without them, because they're so supportive that you can run things past these investor groups, and they see it all the time. This is what they do. And they really challenge you. They challenge our business model, our financial model. They challenge everything. But it's great, because if you second guess it all, you've got someone to bounce ideas off. And there's probably two or three in particular that we really look up to. But we do have 12,000 shareholders, and that's a lot to look after. And of course, of those 12,000, we've probably got top 10 that we catch up with regularly. And of those, there's the top 3 or 4 that I spend a lot of time, most of my time, speaking with and keeping them abreast of our ideas, our plans. And then, they'll give us their 2 bobs worth as well.
It's really transparent, actually, just what you're describing. I think about the other style where, the CEO just puts out the quarterly results and has to then face the angry mob if it's not been favorable. It sounds like you have a really good working relationship with investors. I imagine, that just probably gets them more excited about being part of the journey.
Yeah, look, we do. I agree, except I don't get to speak with 12,000 shareholders, and a lot of our shareholders don't have, sign up for our email database, so they only get the ASX announcements. And so there's a lot of people, there's thousands and thousands that I'm missing. And so I still do get, when the share price is down, like it has been for the last year, I do get a lot of, I won't say hate mail, but certainly I get some
queries.
Some
feedback box.
Shareholders. But my rule is, and I think when people can understand our story and they understand where we've come from, and they understand the people that we have in this business and the passionate and dedicated, not only the customer care team, but our medical liaison team, when people realize what we're actually doing, then they sort of understand our story and our journey, then they're fine. So I make it a rule is that anybody that reaches out, I personally will contact them. So if they leave a number, I will call them immediately. And failing that, I will email them. And I open a direct line and I'll say, here is my number, you call me anytime, because it's so important. Every single one of those shareholders plays a part in our story. Obviously the top 10, top 20, I know very well. But we obviously have a lot of shareholders that I don't know personally. I do often go to the different cities, capital cities, and offer to catch up with our shareholders, because I love telling our story and I love them being a part of it. And I want to get to know them, and I want them to know me. And more importantly, I want them to know our team and the energy and the passion and the reason why we do what we do, because that changes everything.
The idea, of being public to me is so scary to have, forces beyond your control that might not even be relevant, but influencing. We see it all the time in America at the moment, even today. I think, especially there was an announcement about cryptocurrency going wild based on, somebody's perception. Yeah, that kind of stuff that exists is just, surely some of the investors know that cannabis has a 20% leeway anyway, right? You've got to account for that when you're dealing with all the figures.
This is true. It is so hard. It is so hard to do financial modeling on this plant.
Oh my goodness. But I imagine, kind of speaking to Andrew's point originally, that, without going too far into it, but having some of those, let's say, higher profile public figures as investors, I think in my head, that does kind of work towards destigmatizing the plant. And, when you're getting, front page news type investor kind of pieces put out there, we had Damien Hardwick on the show the other week, and it's just like that type of thing. When people that have that notoriety are getting behind the plant, I think it works in favor of the industry as a whole. So that would probably be my commentary on answering the question that was asked to you from Andrew.
No, definitely. Sorry if I didn't answer it. I wasn't.
No, I didn't mean it like that.
Look, I agree. I think, gosh, hasn't the landscape changed so much in the last 6 years? Where we were, where we've come from, and where we are, and just in another 2 years it'll change significantly again. And so you're right, the people, now we're talking about psychedelics and the down scheduling of that, and that is incredible, and who would have thought it would happen so soon? So Australia is progressive, and as much as it feels like it's slow and we've got some hurdles, it has moved quickly. But we're so grateful for some of our shareholders, like Hancock Prospecting, who have been really supportive, particularly when we went into the Danish facility. But also Thorny, who's now our biggest shareholder, and they've been supporting us all the time, and they're a really influential group of people, and just to have their support as well gives us so much confidence that what we're doing is the right thing.
Yeah, amazing. So, well, talk to us. Maybe I'm just curious as well about these changes that obviously pending, that are coming soon around GMP, and that the overarching aim is to level the playing field. I'm curious, where do you think that will leave Australian licensed producers? Do you see more opportunities to be, I guess, servicing even maybe competitors with private white label products, or how do you see LGP post 1 July?
Oh, do you know what? I was kind of hoping you wouldn't ask me this, because I have a very different. I don't think anybody knows what's going to happen on the 1st of July, because Look, at first I thought, oh, this is great for Australian producers. You know, there's the top there's the 80-20 rule, right? And you've got sort of the top 10, 20 medicines out there or products, and then it tails off. And now there's over 500 different products. So my initial thought was, once that comes into play, it'll probably get rid of a lot of the tail end. And so a lot of that tail end, because they're probably the groups that are charging a lot less, and it's often imported product. And so if they disappear because they're not up to GMP standards, then obviously that patients can potentially move across. But I'm not thinking that. I'm kind of going, I don't know what changes is going to actually happen, because I think people will find loopholes. I think there already are. There's a huge amount of flour that's being imported. It really doesn't change us, Little Green Pharma, our business model. We've always done that. We've always been GMP, so everything that we do. So in terms of our operations, it's sort of negligent, but it's more about what happens to the competitive space, which will be interesting, and nobody actually really knows what's going to happen.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting one as well. I was, I guess, looking at it through the legal lens and considering different ways that they could have regulated it. I mean, they're unapproved therapeutics, so it would seem possibly against that backdrop to be onerous to be asking sponsors to provide documentation in advance of supply. But yeah, by all accounts, it's, that there is a latitude that's being given to industry, that, it's expected that you have your GMP certification in order on your imports, but you'll only have to produce those if we ask for them. So I'm with you in the sense that I'm very curious to see what happens post 1 July, whether or not there's active enforcement activity or audits and that sort of thing. Yeah, it'll be interesting.
It will be interesting. And I think, look, there's so many GMP products coming in already. And to find GMP in Australia and packaging is not that hard anymore. And in terms of the policing side of it, I mean, we haven't even got across and on top of the unlawful advertising, and promotional stuff, which Little Green Pharma was caught up with, which was, extremely unfortunate for our business, because it was soul destroying when that happened. And when we went out quite openly and publicly with the reasons and the infringements that we were fined with, and it was really upsetting. But our doctors were so amazing and supportive. We got done, for example, for third-party social media posts because it named our product and said, your product was helped to change my life, thank you. And we got fined for that because we didn't take it down, so it was seen as promotional. And then the other one was the CMI, so the consumer information sort of medicines leaflet that you have inside your medicine package. We had that on the website, but that wasn't so much the issue according to the TGA. The issue was that we had in the link, which was in fine print down the bottom. So it was that information instruction leaflets, not promotional. It's that black and white boring document. But because the name of our products was on the link, that was us promoting it. And we got fined 9 times for that. So when you look at that in comparison to potentially other, what else is happening in the space, we were pretty upset by that. So anyway, that's another topic altogether.
I totally share your frustration, Fleta, because, and I don't envy the job that particular unit, the advertising unit within the TGA has to do. But I look at it and just go, well, okay, is it required that you dole out the same fine 9 times? Or, I know there's been instances where, it's both, for example, one type of contravening conduct, for want of a better term, can actually fall as both a contravention of the poison standard and then a separate contravention under the particular advertising part of the Therapeutic Goods Act. And to me, it does seem like overkill to have sort of several bites of the cherry for the same offending conduct. But, that's the way that they play. And I also think, it's not like there's any incentive for the TGA. It's not like that money goes into, into their pockets to fund their enforcement activities. It goes straight into Commonwealth consolidated revenue. So it's, I find it interesting. And I think like everyone in the industry, everyone's trying to do the right thing. We'd always, for any TGA people listening, we'd always just appreciate a call. Just let us know if there's something that you see that we're doing, you know, if it's not egregious or it's unintentional. And clearly the examples you've just cited would fall in that category. I mean, a phone call would have saved them the time taken to actually write the 60-page letter. But instead, you know, we see black market operators continuing to operate without any consequence. So it's not all that fair, I think, is my big rant. I think that's where I'm going with that.
Oh, look, it was a good lesson learned, and we're happy to sort of take that on and go, right, let's own it. But now we need to enforce this across the entire industry, and everybody needs to come to the party, because it's a really great opportunity and time to sort of conform and make sure that everyone's compliant. And that's, you know, part of what the ETAAs, the Emerging Therapeutics Association of Australia, is doing as well, is to get a code of conduct, which we can all abide by, and then have the body that's talking to the TGA rather than all these different companies that's trying to communicate. So I think hopefully that will evolve for the best of everybody, because we want this industry to thrive. We want our patients to thrive. We want to show the rest of the world how it's done, and Australia can do that. So it's good for the long run.
And what about the I suppose just you just touched on the ETAA. We have the Australian Medicinal Cannabis Association. We have the Medicinal Cannabis Industry Association, MCIA. I mean, this is to be expected when you have an emerging industry, that, you know, different people will stand up and say, you know, well, actually, here's what we think are some good ideas to contribute towards advancing this industry. But I guess what's your take on, you know, this, I guess, minefield of different industry associations? Do you think it's helpful, or do you think it would be better, I guess, speaking as a CEO of one of the larger ASX companies, to have a consolidated group? How do you see that?
Yeah, look, maybe once it becomes a more mature industry, but I think at the time, and even when this third one was formed, look, each one is slightly different. And we chose, and it's not that we didn't want to be a part of one, but we wanted to go with an industry body that was really going to represent what our beliefs were and what our values and what we were going to get out of it. So one of them's more patient driven, which is great. And we want that patient outcomes as well. But for us at the time, and this is now going back sort of a year or two, it was all about GMP and the quality and you know, the regime that we're working with. And it was really about how do we make this an equal playing field. And so that's kind of where the third one stemmed from. So look, I get that there are three. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's a shame, but at the same time, I think each one serves a bit of a different purpose. And I think that there'll be potentially some coordinating between the three. So I don't think it's such a bad thing. Okay.
No, very good. Now, I wanted to also talk just a bit about, I mean, you've got over in WA, Brian Walker, who's been on this podcast before, great man, and Sophia Mormond. We have David Eddershank and Rachel Payne here in Victoria. It looks like Jeremy Buckingham will be elected, probably by the time this podcast gets released, has been elected to the upper house of New South Wales. We've got 5 legalised cannabis politicians, and we know that the levers for legal change ultimately fall in the Commonwealth realm. We'll need amendments to the Narcotics Act, but I just wanted to ask you, I know obviously LGP's focus is medicinal at this time. Do you think, though, that if we were to see cannabis legalized in the future, that your business is versatile enough to be able to take those opportunities in that space?
Yeah, it's very possible. And what I say now is never say never. However, we do have, and we always have had, a very strict sort of pharmaceutical focus. And that again is driven by our shareholders. And so we need to consider our top shareholders as well, because they have some have philosophies and this company is based around the medicinal pathway, but Germany's kind of throwing that into turmoil a little bit, just with what's happening there. And of course, we're so involved with Germany. We're just across the road, literally across the border. So we're sort of, and we're in Denmark, so it's a 2-hour drive just down, not even down to the border there. And so, of course, depending on what legislation happens there or how that pans out over the next year or so, will also help to shape the future of our company. So we're open to it, but I guess there are lots of formalities that would need to happen. And of course, we've also got a team, that are often thinking about what if. That's the great thing about
Andrew, it is little green pharma. You're trying to turn it into big green company. big green retail.
Yeah. Well, that could be a wholly owned subsidiary. Anyway, but talking, so I'm, and please forgive my naivety, I'm got my head knee deep in everything that happens in Australia. But what about what is the situation in Germany at the moment? Because I'm actually not across that.
Look, Germany's growing quickly. Probably not as quickly as Australia. I reckon Australia is the fastest growing market at the moment. So that's why it's such an important industry or market or jurisdiction. But Germany is so important, particularly in Europe. It's the number one country there. A little bit like Australia, we don't have exact clarity on the numbers, but it's in the hundreds of thousands of patients who are benefiting. I think it was nearly 20 ton of flour was imported into the country last year. Not saying that all of that was dispensed. It could have been sort of on-sold or not dispensed at all, but that was sort of the figures. So Germany is a really interesting one. It's a very important jurisdiction for us. It's helped to shape our business model because not all Australian companies can actually export to Germany. They do have different guidelines. The pharmacopoeia is a little different to our Aussies. It tends to be more strict, generally speaking, except for the micro count in the recent changes for Australia, which is really strange. But then you look at countries like France, for example, which is it's more strict. France and even Italy, which is really hard to get in with. But Germany is still very important. We don't have our own brands there. With a small amount of oils, but we actually white label. So we have a very different business model for Germany. So we white label everything into that country. But we're expecting to sort of send about a ton into Germany in the next 6 to 12 months, mainly from our Danish facility. So that's set up really well, particularly for the German market. But yeah, France is a really interesting one. I think that's where there's a study happening at the moment, which Little Green Pharma is doing the bulk of. So there are 4 suppliers, and we're doing probably 60% of the volume. They've just, the government very kindly extended the trial. And why wouldn't you when the companies, are paying for the medicine? So, so we're out of pocket. So that's not great. So our investors are always like, what's happening in France? But look, it'll be great when it does hopefully catalyze into a medicinal cannabis legislation, because of course we think that we'll have some good brand equities and great relationships, not only with the government, but also the prescribing doctors and the hospitals. And there are, we've probably got 1,200 patients at the moment that's utilizing our medicine. And that's actually coming from Australia because our standards are so high in Australia that that's really important. Yeah.
That's part of the query that I had about the Danish move. Like, I do understand it, but at the same time, I know there's a lot of demand for Australian produced product and the quality, like, and in my head, and I'm sorry if this is maybe one of the tougher questions, but in my head, moving to Europe makes sense when you're saving on things that are really hard, for example, Australian labor, but Danish labor is not cheap as far as I'm aware. So I'm really curious around the kind of economics with what you can share around that, because obviously the Danish or any Scandinavian quality you'd put on par with Australian. So I'm trying to understand how that is a more effective approach in my head, at least, other than a fully equipped facility that you got for an absolute bargain, which is
well, you just nailed it, Mitch. It's a high cost jurisdiction and it is on par with Australia, like Swiss, Danish made medicines, and that's exactly why we did it. And what we did, that's our business model. we can't compete with a lot of the low cost products that are coming in. So we have that premium end, and that will allow us to get into countries such as France and Italy that have such a high regulatory hurdle to jump before you can get into the country. Like Germany now is quite easy to get into. So these other countries, even Poland, you've got to register a product first. So our products are undergoing registration at the moment before you can start selling. So every country is very different. The UK is probably the easiest to sell into, and then Germany, and then France is very different. But I think, look, we did think long and hard about that, but the fact that we picked up that facility, cents in the dollar, we picked it up for 20 mil, and Canopy bought it for, or spent upwards of 120 million.
Wow.
And to pick it up for 20 mil, and it's already, that is humming along. That facility is just absolutely insane. Like, we have right-sized that business, and the fruits of our labor, what we had to do is change out the genetics from Cannabis, what they had in there, to our own. And so we have a development program that's been happening there for the last year and a half. And now we've got 30 unique strains coming out, which is incredible. And they're exclusively, we work on exclusive agreements with certain groups around the world, and in certain countries. And so, we're able to do that. And we have that. Our costs are great. Like, the biggest cost for us over there was power because of the war recently, but even that started to stabilise, and the government's going to help a little bit on that side of things. But even with the power, our costs are well under $1 million a month, and what we can get out of that's a 30-ton biomass capability, that facility, and we're only sort of working in 10%, not even. So the great news is that we can, we can ramp up and down as needed. And it's a huge facility, and it's just got a state-of-the-art manufacturing, a post-harvest facility, but also an independent lab that can be positioned there. And so we'll have in-house testing as well, which we'll work on once we sort of get to profits. We'll look at the next stage of our business. We're being really cautious about what we're spending on at the moment, but it did make sense for us. And the other thing, Mitch, as to why we would be in Europe is because logistics are so hard. The cost to send one bottle to the UK, if you do temperature controlled like you should be, I know some groups don't necessarily, but if you do the right way, then that still costs you $15,000 one way, let alone. So it's only if you start sending hundreds of thousands of bottles does that economies kick in, and it makes the freight worthwhile. And then you've got the permits, the import, export, all this kind of stuff. Transport is one of our biggest costs. And so to be in the European landscape, like to be right there on that landmass where the Germans can come back up their trailer to our Danish facility and bye-bye, we are saving a huge amount on those costs that which you just don't factor in to begin with. But the eventual vision of the company will be that Australia will look after the APAC region because of the logistics, and then the European facility will look after Europe. So that was kind of the goal.
Yeah. No, and if you, with the staff resourcing, if it gets too expensive in Denmark, you can just staff it with Australians. Just cheap.
We had some Aussies. We did send some of our Aussies over there for culture, because culture is so important. And buying the Danish facility, it was tough, because you've already got this existing culture, an existing group of people that are working there. And when you don't hire people personally, it changes. We handpick our people in Australia and the Little Green Pharma team, because we have a brand to uphold and a reputation. Fortunately, they're still like-minded in Denmark, but we have had to sort of infiltrate that and send a few people over and create a different culture, because it is different. So there are those sort of nuances, but nothing that we can't work through. And now that Danish facility is incredible. And once again, if you happen to be across there in Denmark, you are welcome to visit, because she's insane.
Yeah, we'd love to there. That sounds incredible.
Good answer, mate.
So is that and just to confirm, so that one is in Jylland, is it?
So it's in Denmark. It's in central, near Odense. It's spelled
nice. Yeah, cool.
On the island of Fyn. So it's about an hour and a half from Copenhagen.
Yeah, very cool.
Been there actually.
Have you?
Yeah. Had Yeah, had some time in Denmark for a year with Andrew as well, a little bit. So we know the area well. Just
I
import.
never really got outside of Copenhagen though, to be fair. I think you've probably seen a bit more than me, Mitch, but
yeah, I think so. You just can't, talking about importing Australians, you just can't import Norwegians. They're far too expensive.
yeah.
But yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
They have actually got a really great export program. And so you've got one half the government, which is extremely supportive. So the Danish government love business. It's called Invest Denmark. And that side is really fabulous and very supportive, and we'll do anything we can to get you here. It's a very life science driven country. There's a lot of technology that's been coming out of there. But then you've got the flip side of the other government, which are not so into cannabis. And so it's actually, there aren't many patients in Denmark, which is a bit of an issue. But that will change. It's obviously a small country, but for us, we're not there just to focus on Denmark. We're also there to focus on the export. So that was important for us.
Yeah, that makes sense, because otherwise, when you're in Copenhagen, you can just go to Christiania anyway. So.
Yeah, totally.
Oh, Mitch, come on. It's not GMP. Anyway.
I think that's why people go.
No. Look, thank you so much for joining us, Fleta. We know how busy life must be as CEO of an ASX company. So we're very grateful for your time.
Absolutely.
It's been a really interesting chat, actually, just hearing a bit about European opportunities. And yeah, I certainly, am in awe of what you've built over really not even 6 years, or are we maybe just coming up to 6 years? It's really impressive. And we, I guess we'll just be very interested observers for the next 6 and beyond.
Oh, guys, thank you. That's really lovely. Thank you so much. Such a hoot being here today and having a yarn. And look, if anyone's got questions, I'm more than happy to answer as well. So you can reach out at any time. But thanks for the opportunity to say hi.
Yeah, no,
appreciate
it so much. Well, we'll I guess until next time, either we'll catch you over somewhere near Yallingup or maybe over in Fyn in Denmark. But until then, take care.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Fleta.
Bye.
It's Andrew Dowling here and Mitch Kurtz. Thanks for joining us for another episode of the AltMed podcast. Make sure to hit like and subscribe because we have way more content coming out. And you got to stay up to date with it. It was good until you did that.
Okay. Sorry.